I am Jen Hawkins.
And I am Andy Fenn.
And this is
the Jen and Fenn podcast. That will never get old.
It won't. Lovely intro, isn't it?
So,
actually, now I can hear the music in my head. That
yeah.
Like,
it's a good tune.
It's
a banger.
Yes, so we're back. Recording this probably a little bit later than we expected to, but yeah, we're back.
And we are in the throes of Storm Eunice.
Which means we're very much indoors.
We're very much indoors. The windows are battened down.
Sealed, everything, yeah. What we can see outside is just the trees taking a thrashing.
Yes, not quite as bad as yesterday, thankfully.
Yeah, so we're back with what we think is episode 3 now.
Episode 3, probably the final kind of main installment of our Games of 2021 series. We're going to do another episode of kind of bits and pieces and stuff we can't really talk about for an hour.
Well, it's just an honourable mention / stuff that we... Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. And also some dishonourable mentions as well. So.
I think only the one dishonourable mention, actually. I can't think of anything else that I really despised last year.
No, I don't think... And I think that's probably by virtue of me actually just not... If I didn't like the look of it, I didn't bother with it.
Yeah.
So there might have been some howlers out there, but I was a bit like...
No. Yeah.
No.
Very that.
So yeah, this episode is probably one I think you're going to take the wheel on more.
Okay.
Which is, I should preface this one actually by saying I'm going to be a really annoying host on this episode because I don't remember the names of anything, including characters, mechanics. I'm very much that, that thing.
And that push the button.
And then... bloke, that sort of thing. It's very much that. So Andy will be very much taking the wheel on this episode and I'll be...
this is the one we've been teasing in the first 2 episodes because it's quite interesting that we're coming at this from two different angles. We are talking about Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker,
yes,
which is the latest expansion for the critically acclaimed MMORPG series Final Fantasy XIV free trial up to level 60, including the Heavensward expansion.
Yes.
I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since it launched on PS3, which I believe was 2013.
Do you know what? I found my disc copy of that the other day.
Did you?
I did. I still have it from where I tried it back then and couldn't make a head or tail.
Just no.
Just couldn't get my head around it at all. And so you've been playing it since 2013.
I have. I remember getting it on the PS3 in 2013, and then Heavensward came out about a year later, and the PS4 version followed very quickly after that. I didn't play a huge amount on PS3. I played it and I was like, this is okay, but it wasn't really doing it for me. It wasn't until it came out on PS4 and the performance was so much better.
Yes.
And it looked sharper. It just kind of gave it that extra oomph that I needed to really get into it. And obviously by then Heavensward was out, which was, in terms of the story, was a huge improvement as well.
There's a couple of games I think that benefited from that PS4 upgrade, and it's not even comparable, but I would say is similar, was GTA 5.
I agree.
I found GTA 5, including actually probably predominantly its online version, was much... I actually properly played it on the PS4 version because I found the PS3 version was just very...
rough.
The main story was fine, but the online was just it never felt...
It was one of those games kind of similar to what we were discussing with Cyberpunk.
Yes.
Recently, that kind of outgrew the hardware before it came out.
Yeah, 100%. The ambition was far beyond what the intended... But I mean, that's one actually I think we're going to have to do an episode on in the near future because we're both now playing the next-gen
version. Yeah, the next-gen versions of Cyberpunk have literally just dropped a few days ago.
I've started playing it. I think it's really good. But then I think that'll be an interesting episode because neither you nor I come from that camp of people who didn't like it.
We liked it. We liked it already, and now it's even better. So we're definitely going to do an episode on that. But Final Fantasy.
Yes, Final Fantasy.
So I've been playing for 8 years.
That's wild.
Crazy.
Now that's the thing I find amazing about these kinds of games is that you do have a jumping on point, and then if you get on with them,
you're hooked.
You are in them for years.
Has you by the throat.
And that's the thing, because I've never really had access to a PC. So MMOs were very much something that you did on a PC, I think.
Yeah.
And if you were on a console predominantly and you grew up with console gaming, I think it's something that is quite alien to you.
Yeah.
I don't think that was really a thing on consoles for a long time. I could be wrong, but as I say, because it's not something I've ever delved into.
I think, honestly, because the PS3 version of Final Fantasy XIV was announced when Final Fantasy XIV was announced. So the idea was was the kind of original version.
And that's A Realm Reborn, isn't it?
No, this was the original version.
Which has that amazing thing where they kind of just nuke the server
Yeah,
and then rebooted it.
a bit of backstory for the uninitiated. Final Fantasy XIV launched, I think it was 2011 or 2010.
It was a long time ago.
The very first edition of it, and it was pretty much an unmitigated disaster from the word go. The main issues were that there was various kind of gameplay foibles and all the rest of it, but it was also the fact that technically, graphically, they made it too polished. So very few systems could run it and run it well.
Okay.
That was a huge issue.
So it was more style over actual substance at the time of launch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was, I can't even remember exactly what was wrong with it, but there was a lot wrong with it.
I mean, from playing A Realm Reborn, it is very much a kind of a run-of-the-mill story as well, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not...
It's a very serviceable, typical RPG story.
It's there as just a bit of foundation for everything else. It's just... It was... Because you have to have a story, this is what we've got here.
And they basically pulled the game back from the brink of death. Because I remember at some point within that first couple of years, it went completely free to play. They dropped the subscription charge altogether because they just wanted people to play it.
Yeah.
They were like, we know it's a disaster.
But we need to get a gauge of how many people are still playing this.
We need to rescue this. In the meantime, please play it for free. So they managed to keep some of the player base.
You need to justify what would eventually be that reboot, don't you? Because you'd probably have had to have presented this to a meeting and gone, we've got this many players. We've something
good.
We've got something here. Yeah. We just have to do this. And I think, so I think that's a pretty good strategy. And
I mean, this was before the reboot was even announced. It was basically a case of we're going to take the subscription charge off the table until such a time where we can fix it and get it into a state where we can legitimately charge for it. And then that can got kicked further and further down the road to the point where they said, we just can't save it. We're going to gut it completely, close the servers down. They had an in-game event where the moon, Dalamud, came down and basically wiped out most life.
I watched a video of that.
It's amazing.
Imagine being in that server when that happened.
That's
thought
it.
That was
people logged in.
Bonkers.
People logged in, especially, and we're kind of all together when this huge world-changing event happened, and that was the end of the servers. They closed the servers down because the world was basically destroyed.
It's like being on the roof in Independence Day.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Everyone's just there together and just watching the world. Or the end of that film Melancholia. Have you ever seen that? Where they just sit together in the tent while the moon comes and destroys the world.
Yeah, it's
what a strange thing to do, but yeah.
But probably quite an amazing thing to be a part of. And then, of course, the servers closed. And there was kind of a gap. I'm not sure how long the gap was. I don't think it was actually that long. I want to say it was sort of 6 to 12 months.
I imagine they must have started working on it prior to nuking the server.
Yeah,
and then
they absolutely did. Yeah, and then A Realm Reborn came out a while after that, and it was at that point where that's when it launched on console.
Yeah, I mean, I jumped into this when.
Very recently, 6 months ago.
I think it must have been about 6 months ago, and I don't know what really possessed me to do it.
Well, I don't either, because let's discuss your history with the franchise as a whole.
Because this is the thing. This is probably one of the only episodes we'll ever do where you and me are coming at this from completely different diametric opposites.
Yeah.
I have never been a fan of Final Fantasy.
I've never got the impression that you hate it.
No, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
It's just not for me. And that's the thing. When I say I'm not a fan, I have no malice against it. And it's not for lack of trying, because I have the one game I did get really into, which again, and this is the thing, I have to caveat this. Every time I've tried to get into this franchise, I have accidentally created a series of ridiculous flubs. That's the only way I can do it.
You've been doing kind of challenge runs without even realizing, just because the systems just don't permeate yours.
So I mean, I played a bit of Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 and I just didn't really understand it, so I just didn't touch it again. Never played any of the other ones subsequently because I knew they were very much in that vein, so I was like, okay, whatever. And then I jumped on with Final Fantasy X on PlayStation 2 because I was really taken in with the marketing of it. And I thought it looked
gorgeous game,
beautiful. And it was on when they used to do those platinum games for £20. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The platinum boxes. I just thought, I'm going to give it a try. And I played it, and I really, really, I say I got into it. I didn't, in terms of I didn't
You
understand.
thought you were having fun.
I was, but I didn't realise what I was doing until, actually, do you know what? I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely convinced I actually realised what I was doing until I met you.
I think you might be right,
because
actually.
I think I just thought I'd got to a point in the game where I was just, I'm really stuck on this. I kind of gave up.
I think you were here and I was playing it one day, and I was using the sphere grid to level my party members up. I think I said something like, "Oh, this boss is really hard. I need to kind of grind for a bit, get some levels, and use the sphere grid."
I kind of went,
and you went, "What's the sphere grid?"
And I was like, "What are you doing?" And you were like, "What?"
I'm leveling up my party.
And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And you were like, "Well, what did you do?" And I went, "Well, I looked at it and I didn't really understand it, so I just ignored it."
And then we discussed how far into the game you'd actually got.
I had got to Maester Seymour's Aeon. Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Ifrit? Is that
Anima? Yeah.
And I just couldn't get any further. And I realise now it's because I was basically doing probably what was like a level 20 boss with level 0 character.
With no stats.
But how I got past anything in hindsight, looking back on it, I'm like...
I think Lulu at level 1 has like 260 something HP.
Yeah.
She must have been on the floor for the majority of the time you were playing.
It was just this aggressive ignorance of, I'm determined to play this and get through it.
But I don't get it.
But I don't understand what I'm doing, but I'm going to persevere with it really bullheadedly.
Yeah.
And it worked for a while. But for years, I was just like, this isn't for me, then I'm just not getting it. And then I just remember that conversation with you vividly, and you looked at me like I'd fallen out of a tree. You looked at me like...
But here's the thing, people actually do know sphere grid runs.
Yes,
you were doing it before anyone else.
I was doing a challenge run without realising. That's the thing, yeah.
Which is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Streamer content gold was going on my PlayStation 2, completely unawares to me.
But it's interesting you mentioned, I didn't realise that you played Final Fantasy VII and kind of just put it on and you were like, oh no.
Well, I think I played it at a friend's house because it was we were sat playing it, and obviously, you pass the controller around, and I think, to put it in context, the games I loved on the PlayStation were games like Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, Resident Evil,
Tomb Raider.
Really strong narrative-driven games. Now, I know that Final Fantasy is that, but I just... It's something I've grown out of. I don't mind it so much now, but I really liked a game that was sort of fully voice acted.
Yeah.
And... I don't know. There was just something about Final Fantasy, because it's all very much like text boxes for speech for a lot.
And that was just a technical limitation.
Of course,
yeah, there was no way. It was already on 3 discs, for God's sake. There was no way they could voice act it as well. But I was actually exactly the same as you when I very first played it. I'd never played an RPG before in my life, because we were of the age where, we didn't really have... The SNES was really the home of the RPGs beforehand.
It was, and I never had one.
I never had one. So I'd never played a Final Fantasy game before. I'd never played an RPG before. And everyone was raving about this game.
I remember it. I remember it really vividly.
Raving about it. And I bought it when it went platinum. Same as you with 10.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, this game is amazing. It's gone platinum. It's only 20 quid. You have to play it. And I thought, okay, fine, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
And I did not understand what the fuck I was looking at.
No.
I started playing it and I was like, what even is this? Like, we went into the first battle.
Yeah.
And I was like, what just happened? What am I looking at here?
I wonder if I had played it that way at home independently, I might have persevered with it and I might have got on with it.
See, I didn't. I gave up.
Okay.
And I returned it.
Yeah.
And then I picked it up again like 2 years later and pushed through that initial kind of confusion.
Yeah.
And then it just had me by the neck.
Yeah.
And
because I know the story's brilliant.
It's
I know it's
absolutely amazing. And I've never missed a Final Fantasy. I've had every Final Fantasy on launch day ever since.
Am I right in thinking your favourite one was 9?
I love 9. I go back and forth between 7 and 9 as my favourite.
Yeah, because I know that there's a lot that there's sort of between that sort of Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8 and Final Fantasy. I'd say those were the 3 games, I think maybe even to this day, that are the favourites. I
think 7 and 9 are definitely favourites. I would say 10 is probably more of a favourite than 8, because 8 is a bit of a kind of an outlier for many different reasons. For the era, it was very experimental and not everything they tried to do with it landed. There was also some real issues with the story. It starts off
like a bit of a Dark Souls 2 then, I suppose.
Kind of, yeah. The story of 8 starts off really well, and then it kind of about 2/3 of the way through, the wheels start coming off, and then it kind of pulls it back in again at the end. But it's not, out of those three, the PS1 era, it's most definitely the weakest. But I still love it. It's a valley between 2 peaks. It's probably the best way to look at it, isn't it? You've got 7, you've got 9. I love it, and loads of people love it. But it's the weird kind of stepchild.
Yeah, the middle child, the strange middle child of that era for sure.
Yeah.
yes, I mean, that's the thing, I suppose. So that's where, when you were playing that was when I was sort of in things. I think probably Metal Gear was
the
me.
thing for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Where people, I think that's something I have noticed, to be honest. Is you can love both, but I think at that era, you were probably playing one of those games.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And mine was very much, was the console defining it was Metal Gear for me.
Yeah.
And things like Resident Evil 2, Silent Hill, and so a couple of other games as well. But those were the three big standouts during that era for me. Those three series, 100% were the standouts.
But what's interesting to me now is we're kind of in a Final Fantasy in general, overall, is in a really awkward period because I played 13 and 15, and enjoyed them for a playthrough for what they were.
Yeah.
But for me, I feel like the mainline series, the wheels have come off a little bit.
They are odd ones because my sister is a Final Fantasy fan. She really likes Final Fantasy, and she sort of jumped into the franchise with 10 and 10-2. So I think she has played those older games, but generally speaking, this kind of game is something that she loves. Same as me, because it's just hours and hours of just
and messing around with
farting around with all sorts of things. She loves it. That's the sort of thing she'll get into and really sink her teeth into. So I've been conscious of these releases as they've happened. But every time one comes out, it's an event.
Yes.
But I've noticed that it's fizzled out very quickly.
This is the thing, particularly with 15, I think. It just felt really flat for me. So the idea of kind of 14 coming out literally in between those two games.
Well, there was a big deal made of the PS3 and Xbox 360 one, wasn't there? Which one was that?
13.
Yeah, so that was a huge deal when that came out. I remember that.
And then a huge disappointment for so many people.
Yeah. Did you enjoy? I remember you enjoying it.
I did enjoy it. And I felt...
I remember you playing it because we hadn't long met each other when that game came out.
No, we hadn't. I played it and I enjoyed it. And I thought the criticism that it was like really super linear was an odd one because they always have been.
There's this I think it's probably one of these where there's this illusion of bigness, isn't there? But actually there really is only one sort of...
You go from A to B.
Thread. Yeah, and there's a lot of sort of peppering around of various things you can do to...
Generally what will happen is you will spend the first 2/3, 3/4 of the game going from A to B to C to D.
Yeah.
And then there will be a bit near the end where you're kind of about to head off to the final section where you'll get an airship and you can then... You have a bit more freedom to zip around the world and do little extra bits and pieces. But for the most part, they are linear experiences.
Linear.
Yeah,
it's
they
still
have to be.
Linear. Yeah, of course it is.
Because they're telling a story.
Yes.
It has to be linear. So I think the issue for 13 was that it was linear and it looked really linear. Okay. You just had all these environments that were literally just like kind of long snaking corridors.
Yeah. It seemed to me that a hell of a lot of focus was put into spectacle because this was a next-gen release.
And it did look stunning.
So those battles, those big bombastic battles were huge with these enormous enemies. There was lots of colour going on. And it was like, that seemed to me where a lot of the design had gone into.
The art style was the focus, I think. Yeah,
it was all about spectacle rather than...
The story is nonsense.
Well, I suppose it's because the original ones didn't have the benefit of being able to say we've got all this technical, horsepower to gallop with. So they did put it all into the story. Whereas I think I got the impression with that one, they got
a bit excited about the tech and forgot to actually kind of flesh it out properly. To this day, I still don't understand what a fal'Cie and a l'Cie are. I don't know what that means.
It means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing to me. And then I remember that installment, which always made me laugh because it was quite timely where everybody suddenly seemed to be getting into K-pop and J-pop, and you were basically with a traveling J-pop band in a car.
Oh, that was 15, yeah.
That was a very strange game. And there was that product placement from Cup Noodles.
Yeah, I found 15 to be flat for quite a lot of reasons. It's a stunning looking game, and there's a big open world to explore. But it's kind of like what we were saying about, I can't remember what game we were talking about on an earlier episode. We said, Andromeda. Big open world, lovely to look
Nothing
at.
Happening
Not a whole lot going on in it.
Nothing happening in it.
The combat I found to be terrible. I found the characters okay, but there was only 4 of them. There were no women. It just didn't quite feel right to me. It wasn't this. We're so used to these diverse
100%.
casts of,
Especially
all
in Final
different
Fantasy, yeah.
different genders and different kind of races and species, even in some cases.
Well, of course, in Final
and
Fantasy,
it was just four blokes, and I was
Well, it
like,
was a
really?
strange. It's a kind of a strange magical world that's a million miles away from the one that we're in. So it's kind of.
I think that's almost the problem. It was too realistic.
I think that was it. It did seem to be very much sort of ingrained in reality. And the other thing I think was a decision I think was controversial. Didn't the combat system change? It was no longer turn-based. Am I right in thinking
It hadn't been turn-based for a while.
No, but that's what I mean. There was there was a shift, wasn't there, with those early games to real-time combat, which actually I didn't play them, but that would have probably been something that would have drawn me in, because I've never liked turn-based combat games.
See, I love it.
Which is one of the reasons I think I found Final Fantasy so difficult to get into, because there's other franchises I'd really love to try, like Persona. I've always wanted to try Persona 5 just because it's a wild-looking game. But I hate turn-based combat. games.
I will say the turn-based combat in Persona 5 is incredibly slick.
Okay.
So even if you're on the fence about it,
that game just seems bonkers more than anything.
Persona 5 is actually one of my games of last generation.
Well, a friend of mine played it, and she seemed to play it for about 6 months. It just never seemed to end.
It goes. I think my last playthrough was something like 120 hours.
It was wild. And then it was, I'm doing this one thing where I've gone into the mind of a teacher.
Yeah.
Who has got a bit of a proclivity about a young student. And I remember talking to her about this, and I think, I can't remember what I was playing, and I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that's the first main dungeon right out the gate. It's basically a teacher who's a pervert.
Yeah.
But
that's what I mean.
It looked really cutesy, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, we're doing some dark shit here.
That's what I mean. I was kind of like, actually, this game sounds like a lot of fun. And
it's great.
I think I have got it, actually. I think, because wasn't it a PlayStation Plus giveaway? So I have, and I probably should jump in and try that, because but yeah, it's just the turn-based element of it has never been something I've enjoyed. So yeah, I suppose we should just then get into how this kind of comes to Final Fantasy XIV, which I would say kind of addresses all the issues of games past in the last 2 generations then. Would that be fair to say?
In what respect?
Well, like you say, there's a lot of things that people haven't enjoyed about the more recent offerings, and now it's kind of come back full circle with this MMO version, which everyone seems to universally praise.
Yeah, and here's the thing, MMOs over the years haven't been known for their stories.
No.
It's always the systems first and then story later.
Yeah.
Whereas most people, and I would agree, that would say that Final Fantasy XIV has a great story, even by Final Fantasy standards, never mind MMO standards.
Yeah.
It's an incredible storyline. As we said earlier, the A Realm Reborn scenario is serviceable.
It's a good setup, because I think what it allows you to do, at least I find, and now that I've played through it and I've just finished Heaven's Ward, I can say that I think it's actually kind of clever, because it's enough to keep you kind of pushing forward, but it's also not so much that it distracts you from what is effectively a good however many hours of you learning how this game works.
That's it, exactly right.
So it doesn't distract you with so much narrative spectacle that you kind of just feel compelled to just go down one route. You do feel you can kind of go, okay, well, I'll do this for a bit, and I'll do this for a bit. It gives you a lot of room to breathe, especially if you've never played a game like this before, and it just kind of just gives you just enough
to keep you going.
Yeah. And then the end of Realm Reborn is really good.
Yeah.
And then there's that patch content afterwards, which actually then I was like, okay, and then I'm starting to really understand why people like this now.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Heaven's Ward, I was like, oh, okay,
this is quite good.
This is taken a turn. Where do we start with an MMO? I mean, how do you begin to talk about an MMO? Really, it's just.
I mean, I don't really know. I can't really I don't want to go into the story in any great detail for 2 reasons. One, because it's a great story and I don't want to spoil it for people.
No.
And 2, because I'm old and I can't remember a lot of it.
Yeah. There is a lot. That's one thing I will say for it. And like I said at the beginning of the episode,
very involved.
I find it very difficult to keep up with characters' names, locations. So when I'm sort of in a Discord server with you guys, and I'm a bit like, oh, they're like, I'm doing that bit, and they're like, what bit? And I'll be like, that bit, and then this happened, and then I'm like, oh, well, it's that, and I'm like,
is it?
You must have done this years ago. How do you remember that? And it's just, but yeah, I think it's these kinds of games. I think that's the thing I find really. Maybe the thing I found intimidating about them for a long time is they're very, very, very involved.
Yes.
And their community is diehard.
Yes.
because you don't ever, I mean, I'm a bit of an odd one. I dip in and out of this game. I play it for huge chunks of time and then I have a little break.
Yeah.
Because I play other single player things. And then now I'm going to start playing it again and get into because I'm going towards Stormblood.
Stormblood, yes.
So I'll start playing that again now and I'll put in a good chunk of time. And it's also because if I start playing this, I just don't get anything else done.
Yeah.
So I have to really
You have to time it properly.
when I'm doing it, especially in the evening, because I won't go to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm playing on it. That kind of thing. So I play it in sort of bursts.
Yeah.
And when I do play it, I love it. But I think the big appeal to me with it is the community element of it.
Yeah.
It's filled a gap that has been missing from online gaming for me for some years, because I used to play things like Destiny. I used to play a lot of online first-person shooters with
Halo
people.
and...
Yeah. And I used to play it with people. And I used to really just kind of, even if I wasn't playing in a team as such, I used to really just kind of like that logging onto a game and just knowing you were playing with other people. And there was something quite oddly comforting about just being online and playing games with people. That's something over the years that I've actually kind of fallen out of love with.
I don't think it's even that. I think it's just less of a focus now. I feel like the kind of PS3 360 era was like the golden age
of it is gone, and that's, I think
of online
you're right.
multiplayer.
Like the 360 era was when that was probably at its best for me.
Yeah, we were doing Halo Reach all the time. We were doing Gears of War. We were doing Mass Effect 3 multiplayer 100%. All of the time.
So it's kind of just come back. And like I played Destiny on PS3 and PS4, which I did really get into for a couple of years.
It's not quite got the same sense of community with Destiny, has it?
Not at all. And that's it. So there was always this kind of thing that was lacking with it. And then when I got into this, I really quite like that, just logging on, especially if you're in a free company like we're in.
Well, that's the thing. I think the beauty of it for you was we already had an established free company, which is, 100%. For those who don't know, it's Final Fantasy XIV's version of a guild, basically.
Yes.
We're in a free company. It's a very small free company. I think 8 of us, maybe less.
It's quite a jumping little group now, isn't it?
It is.
There's quite a few people.
But you were able to come into that group. We're all at various stages of the game, various skill levels. And, there's a few of us that have been playing since the Dark Ages and can answer questions and help out the sprouts and the younglings. So it's just a nice, very tight-knit group of people that you could come into. And even if it was overwhelming at points, you could be like, guys, what's this? How do I...
And that is paramount to my actually being able to stick with this.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't have had that, I wouldn't have been able to. Because there's just so much of these kinds of games I just don't understand without literally having my handheld. And it's one type of game that now I've got no pride or ego about it at all, because I don't know what I'm doing.
And the beauty
I'm happy to have my hand held through everything and be treated like a child, patted on the head, well done, because otherwise I haven't got a fucking clue what I'm doing. But
the beauty of Final Fantasy XIV is, as much as it does have a root in the RPG kind of world, there isn't actually a huge amount of customization.
No.
The idea is,
I get the impression games like, wow, we're insanely involved.
I don't know about that. But, the thing is, yes, there's loads of pieces of gear with all these different stats and everything.
Mm-hmm. I can still get that. I can understand that enough to know what it's doing or what it's not doing.
You just wear the best stuff. You just hit recommended gear. It'll tell you what is the best stuff in your inventory. Put that on and off you go.
It's very accessible.
There's no real customization. You don't customize your skills.
No.
You just level up and you unlock new skills, and then they're part of your toolkit.
Well, I think one thing I think is necessary for people who are coming to these games for the first time is to find people who know what they're doing with them, because it was things like setting up hotbars.
Yes.
And understanding how
the heads-up display
combos work.
The heads-up display is a nightmare. I remember vividly when you first put that game on and you've got that kind of the default HUD. And it's a fucking
migraine.
Mess.
It is a migraine. You're looking at it and you're like, what is going on here? And because I remember just looking and I was like,
what am I looking at?
I don't understand what any of this is. And you were like, just give me a minute.
Yeah.
Click
and
this.
We
click that,
literally
click that.
we had a call, didn't we, on Discord?
Literally
and it was like, right, so this is what you want your settings to be. This is it. This is it. And move this over here and then do that. And and things with the display names, like it displays by default displays the name of every single other player character in the environment. So you've just got a sea of names running around everywhere. It's like, you don't need to know that. Get rid of that. I feel like the one thing that they could do that would really help onboard new players is to completely not redesign the user interface itself, but redesign how it's displayed to a first-time player.
Yes.
Because I remember turning it on when I first got it on PS3 and being like, what am I looking at?
Yeah, exactly that. And you're just kind of like, Especially when I can imagine back then with that old hardware, because one thing I think that it really does benefit, and maybe this was the case on PS4 as well, I'm not sure, having that touchpad on the PlayStation controller, which you can then use to click between things, is a boon.
Yeah.
Because it's effectively a mouse. I can't imagine navigating any of that interface without that system.
Well, I think on PS3, I can't remember exactly, but I think you just use the select button.
Okay,
to do the
that
same
would make
thing.
sense.
So
Because otherwise I'm like, that just seems like a nightmare of navigating various different systems. But I mean, that's the thing I will say about it as well, is the thing I loved about it is it's filled a niche in terms of online gaming for me. I really love the social side of it, even if I'm not playing with you guys or whatever.
I mean, sometimes we log on.
It's company.
We fully intend to actually play some content, and we just end up chatting.
Which is great. And that's the thing. There's this really nice social element to it. It's been, especially in the last 2 years where you've had limited social contact. It's been, I wish I'd found it sooner, because I think during that time, it would have really, really helped.
Yeah.
It would have been just a constant stream of conversation and checking in with people and whatever else it is. And I think that's why these games have so much appeal. That's why people do love these games. People perhaps aren't particularly socially. I mean, there's that terrible stereotype, isn't there, of the basement dwelling, whatever, that doesn't.
Which is basically me. You know, I'm a highly anxious person. I have depression, anxiety, and agoraphobia. I don't go out unless you put a grappling hook in my mouth and drag me.
Which is true.
And it serves a great purpose for someone like me. Who finds it very difficult to socialize. You know, I can go out, and if I've got my people around me, then I'm okay. But being able to just log on to a game like this and my people are there is it's an
instant access to social interaction.
Exactly.
And I think this is the way, again, where you and I differ on this, which is why I have to be incredibly disciplined with how often I play it, because I do go out a lot.
Yes.
My evenings is I go to gyms. I've got evening classes to do, that kind of a thing. If I put this on for too long, my life
your life
would
be destroyed.
Completely derailed. So
it only serves to enrich mine.
100%. And it does enrich. I love the game, and that's the thing. But when I'm playing it, when I'm in the throes of playing it regularly, I look forward to kind of thinking, right, Friday night, I've got nothing to do. I'm going to log on to this game for hours and hours now. And just sit and chat and play games. Same way, like a Sunday afternoon is a sweet spot for me, when you've just had something to eat. And you think, brilliant, between now and probably when I go to bed tonight, I'm going to log on to Final Fantasy XIV and just play some games. Same as Saturday night. Because we did it a couple of weeks ago where we did some treasure hunting things on Saturday.
I wasn't there. I missed that one.
Which
but it
was
sounds
fantastic.
like you had...
It was brilliant.
I'd never done a single treasure hunt in my entire 8 years on the game.
No.
And I did it about a week before you did. I did the new ones from Endwalker about a week before you did your run. And I was like, this is the best thing ever.
Just the sense of very silly camaraderie of finding these treasure maps and then going on these little... Because the doors are RNG based, whether you progress or not.
50-50 chance.
So it was very much a...
I was like, I had to take the lead, because it was my map that we used first. And I had to take the lead. I was like, okay, first of all, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Second of all, I've never been so fucking anxious in my entire life. Like, I'm picking door A or door B, and it's a 50-50 chance. And then there's like another system where sometimes if you pick the wrong door, it will suddenly there's like a secondary chance for it to actually be like, oh no, you go through.
Which it did to us a lot, because we were like, oh, and then it was
like, and then all of a sudden I'm playing a game of higher and lower, and everyone else in the party's like, higher, lower, and I'm like, oh my god.
That's the thing. And that's the thing, it's just so lovely. And the game itself is fantastic. And I noticed as soon as we got past the A Realm Reborn and the post-patch content, the post-release content, onto Heaven's Ward, the quality of this game just suddenly goes up. Like, noticeably. The one thing they have to talk about is the voice acting. Yeah,
I think the original A Realm Reborn scenario would be far more palatable if the voice acting wasn't quite so diabolical.
There's some honking bad voice acting.
And I mean, they must have been, by this point, because the original version of the game was such a failure, they must have been on a shoestring budget with a very small dev team trying to bring this game back from the precipice of Hades.
It reminds me kind of probably the original Tomb Raider, where most of the voices were probably just somebody's mum or someone they knew.
It actually was, wasn't it? Judith Gibbons
was somebody's
mum.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So someone's like, does anyone know any local amateur actors?
Does anyone know any actual voice actors we can get on?
Yeah. Anybody that can just come in for an afternoon and record a few lines of dialogue.
And from Heaven's Ward on, it's stars.
It is stars, and that's the thing that really struck me. There's some really what's the phrase that you use for that? It's a
Household names.
Household name. Yeah. So you'll be like, the one for me was Tracy Ann Oberman.
Yeah, of all people.
That was the thing. I was like, how do you get someone like Tracy Ann Oberman doing this? How do you approach, or does she approach them? But then I will say that voice acting in general is becoming a really big thing.
Yes. A lot more just what you would call general typical actors are doing voice work. It was something
I think that was quite frowned upon for someone, because there was a lot of snobbery about gaming in general.
You were either one or the other, I think, weren't you? For a really long time.
And it's not just that, but I think if you'd have approached a certain type of actor at one point and said, do you want to, they'd be like, oh no.
Yeah.
Because it was considered very much it's not an art form, and it was very much there was a snobbery around it. Whereas I think the last decade or so particularly, I think there's been probably I would say the PS4 era, you're looking at games that have become almost cinematic in quality.
Yeah.
These actors are signing up to do
budgets.
a film.
Yeah.
Basically, as far as they're concerned.
Because Mass Effect is the same. It's absolutely full of proper stars.
Because it's not even just the voice acting anymore. It's the mocap element for a lot of them. I mean, the most recent example is you look at Resident Evil Village.
Yeah.
There's an entire, everything in that game was mocapped. It was all done on a set. So it was almost like they were doing a piece of theatre.
Yeah.
And they were doing the voices, they were doing it. So Heaven's Ward and onwards is just, that's the thing that got me, is just, this is actual voice talent doing this now. And the difference was night and day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the writing is massively improved as well, but I don't think the writing necessarily had to be that good in A Realm Reborn, because it is literally just a very typical RPG storyline that serves its purpose.
There's also a lot of world building going on
there is.
for the uninitiated.
The characters are being introduced and built up. Yeah, absolutely. But it's when, as you say, as soon as you hit Heaven's Ward, it's pedal to the metal then.
Yeah, and even that, just in terms of the environments as well, like the new environments that you go to, I noticed the quality of that goes up.
Yeah.
Like there's that wonderful area, this is where I'm going to be irritated and can't remember the name. But there's that area that you go into, which is the new hub area, as it were. Ishgard, that's it, which is like something out of Bloodborne.
Yeah.
It's like these massive
Gothic spires and
cathedrals and all that kind of. So immediately I was a bit like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, this is stepping up.
But yeah, I mean, it just, the quality just goes up. And so, I mean, I suppose the purpose of this episode as the best of 2021 was to talk about Endwalker. So
I think it's basically like every other episode we've done so far, where it's just like, you can't just, we can't just talk about Endwalker. Here is the crux of the episode. Endwalker is very good. Go and buy it. That is basically all I can say about Endwalker, because I don't want to spoil the story. And we can't explain why Endwalker is so good without going back across the whole shebang and kind of, it's a culmination of the entire 10 years.
Yeah. Is it called the Scion or Scion?
The Hydaelyn and Zodiac saga.
Yeah. So that's the thing I've heard, is that it is a perfect culmination of all of that. And that's the other thing we probably should mention as well, is just the value for money. With this
unbelievable.
game. And I think this is the reason why I've actually been, there's two reasons I've been a bit more frugal with this gaming generation so far. One, the games are too expensive. And secondly, I've had every piece of content for this game up to Endwalker for £15. And there is so much to do in that game, to the point where I'm like, so between playing this, Hitman 3 and Mass Effect Trilogy, I've had no reason really to go and buy something I'm half-hearted about.
People thumb their noses at subscription models for games like this, but I can honestly say I've been a subscriber. I think it's something like 2,400 days I've been subscribed for. As
I
have
have no regrets about this at all.
It's the best value for money of any game I've ever played in my life.
I mean, you obviously you pay for your installments, but the amount of free content that's then added.
You know, you pay, I think they're about 40 quid, the expansions. I think people think that it's just what you then play on that day when you buy that expansion.
For about,
the next 2 years of content. 2
years of content, because that's the thing. That's the thing I was going to check with you, is I'm not sure, obviously coming into this at the 11th hour, how long typically was it between releases?
It's usually 2 to 2.5 years.
So yeah, you're obviously paying, so you are paying for 2 years worth of content, and that includes all the free patches and upgrades and everything else that you get during that time. Yeah. At no point, even if I'm not playing this game for a chunk of time, I've got no issues with paying for, because I will jump back into this and I know I'll get my money's worth.
And it's not an egregious amount of money.
It's better value for money than PlayStation Plus. I'm going to throw it out.
Wow.
That's what it is. PlayStation Plus.
Well, it is now, yeah. It used to be really good. It's not great now.
The only reason I still have PlayStation Plus is because
of the multiplayer.
Is because
you don't need it for Final Fantasy.
Oh, well, that's a game changer. Sorry, Sony.
It's in the bin.
I might check out then. But yeah, I mean, everything is just such great value for money.
Yeah.
And it's something that I genuinely do think I'm going to be playing for years to come.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about flubs earlier, so I have to jump this in. We've already identified my latest.
Oh, yes,
fantasy
we
flub.
did. Actually, that wasn't even me. I didn't.
No,
even
it wasn't.
notice
It was
that.
another member of our free company sent me a message privately to say that because he asked me what class I was.
Yeah.
And I went, I think I'm a dragoon. And he went, are you sure? And I'm like, no.
Well, let's do the background first.
Yeah,
So for those who don't,
you're better at explaining this than I am.
for those who don't know, basically, when you start Final Fantasy XIV as a completely fresh player, you start with what is called a class. So you've got Lancer, you've got an Archer, Thaumaturge, which is kind of like a mage, damaging mage. You've got the Conjurer, which is the healer. And then the idea was that you would start playing as these classes, and then the class would then become a job, which is a different thing entirely. So the Conjurer would become the white mage, the Thaumaturge became the black mage, you had the Archer, which would then turn into a bard. But this would happen at, I think it was level 30, this would happen. And you would do a quest. Are you all right?
No, I still don't completely understand what I've done. So now I'm actually listening to it being explained. I'm finding it really funny.
So at level 30, you do a quest, and then the reward for that quest is your job stone. So in Jen's case, she started out as a Lancer, which is the base class for the Dragoon job. So at level 30, she would have done her quest, she would have been given a job stone, and then just decided not to do anything with it. So she's at level 65 or something ridiculous, and she's still a Lancer.
I must preface this by saying I didn't know to do anything with it. I don't even know if I have it. I don't know what I've done. I don't know. I really don't. I must have it. I'll have to check my inventory, and then we'll update you on the next episode.
But the funniest thing is, do you remember that evening where you were in Dravania and you were you were in the area where you fought Ravana, the boss?
With all those little goblin things.
Yeah, and you were going,
Bastards.
These things are hitting really hard and I don't know why. They're just killing me and I can't. And we went through the whole thing of looking at your gear and thinking, right, you could do with upgrading your accessories, go off and buy your accessories.
Which
you did. And then, to your credit, you managed to get through it. Little did I know at the time you didn't have your job stone equipped, so your stats were like cut in half immediately.
So this is another example of that sheer bloody mindedness.
Yeah.
Born out of ignorance.
You just make it happen.
That just, because I don't know any better, so I'm just assuming that I'm playing the game really, really badly, so I'm just determined to just do better. That's the way I'm looking at it, I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to persevere with this. I'm not going to give up on it. And instead of just asking for help, I've just powered through it. So yeah, that's been the latest flub in a series.
That's your only real flub.
No, so far, and that's only because I've had my hand held. I've got no shame about it. Like, honestly, I think it's going to be a long time before I'm completely...
But to be honest, when I think about it, I've been playing this game for 8 years. And there is stuff that I've only learned in the last 2.
Mm-hmm. I genuinely think that's always been the reason these games have always been a bit of a, okay. Because I think there is a lot to learn. And I think if you are a new person coming into this, if you really do have no experience with this whatsoever, I think you do need to find a little clan
of people that can kind of help you,
show you through it. And I think that's the thing I've noticed about Final Fantasy as well. That's important to mention, I think. It's quite easily the least toxic online community I have ever played games with.
Yeah. Even if you end up in a duty with complete randoms, I've seen it many, many times. I'm not, even as someone who's played for such a long time, I'm not one to give unsolicited advice. If someone asks me a question, then I'll help. But I'm not one of these people that will go, you're doing that wrong, you need to do X, Y, and Z. But I've kind of sat on the sidelines and watched someone ask someone else in the party how to do something. Yeah. And 99.9% of the time, it's a very nurturing community.
I've never encountered anything negative. Like I did a dungeon. I suppose you do. They're bound to be out there, but I haven't even seen that. It's the most negative reaction I have had to something is a non-reaction. Someone's just ignored you, which is fine.
Which may be just because they don't speak the language.
Well, quite. That's the thing. And that's obviously something else to consider. But I did a dungeon. I did a quest not long back. It was a story quest. And I don't think any of you guys were online at the time. So I just did it with randomers. And I didn't completely understand what was going on. It was an enemy that I want to say was on a wall. So the wall turned.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know.
That was the Great Goober Library.
Yeah, it was the book. That's the library.
The book, and it turns the floor into ice and you have to skid.
I'd made a flub and gone behind it when I shouldn't have done, so I wiped and died. Yeah. And I was just mortified. I was like, oh no.
That's such a common mistake, though.
As soon as I put it straight in the chat, I was like, I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. And the guy was like, it's fine, don't worry. And I was like, I'm sorry, I really don't know what I'm doing. I was like, so I'm going to be a bit of a pain in the arse. instead of taking that as an incitement to just kick me out of the party or leave, before we went anywhere, every time we got to a new point in that, they would stop and go, right, this is what's going to happen. This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Stay close to me and just follow me. And when this happens, do this. Total randomers. They didn't have to do that at all.
No, but you will find the vast majority, because the people just want to clear the content at the end of the day. They want to progress, so it's in everyone's interest to get everyone up to speed.
But they're distinguishably nice about it.
Yes,
that's the thing. It's very much this kind of, it's a community. It is a proper community, and it's people who are, because you couldn't just give someone instructions and that's it at the end of the day. But these are people. They're just nice people.
But here's the thing. And I meant to bring this up earlier and I completely forgot. In Final Fantasy XIV, you basically have this main storyline that is kind of a non-negotiable. But then you have all this other content. Like you can do the gathering, you can do the crafting. Once you kind of get to a certain point, you unlock high-end duties like, extreme difficulty bosses and the savage raiding and everything. But it's all completely optional.
This is this thing you mentioned, because that was what I was going to say as well, is all of this expanded, what's the word I'm trying to think? There's almost this economy, isn't there, for this game? Like one of the free company members of that is someone who's particularly good at crafting. So decided this time to sort of get all the materials in place ready for this new savage raid, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
created all this content that they knew these people were going to pay a fortune for.
And made millions.
In this game's currency.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is really lovely, this is the silly little moments that I love in this game, and it reminds me a lot of Destiny, is when you will go to these hub areas and you will find the, are they bards? Musicians?
Yeah.
And you'll get these people who've created this entire, like they point for point music tabs of actual songs perfectly into these little instruments.
I mean, it's actually against the terms of service.
It actually was against the terms of service. But I actually stood for about 20 minutes while somebody did a performance of Pretty Fly for a White Guy on a harp.
And then I believe they went into Born This Way.
Yep, and then they did some sort of a cover of a Blink 182. So it was basically like somebody done like a medley of our teenage years, put it onto a harp. And there was a huge crowd of people around it, dancing being silly. And it reminded me of Destiny when you get those dance parties.
Yeah,
when everybody would just start doing the dance circles in Destiny. Those little moments is what keeps me coming back to it. There's just so much character and so much warmth and life in that game. I find it so wholesome when I play Final Fantasy.
What I love, though, is that you do have all this content available to you, but you're not penalised if you don't partake.
I think it's the difference between because it caters for every level, because I'm definitely a casual player. And then you've got the intermediate players and I think it kind of caters for people who want to keep climbing that ladder. The more you want to learn about the game, the more they'll give you to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, you're not penalised for it. But if you do want to turn this into like a full, because there are people out there, I'm sure, where this is the only thing they play. 100%. This is all they play.
Yeah.
They might play something else, very seldom, but every day they're logging on to play this and only this.
Yeah.
So those people are being catered for. There's so much for them to do. This, the other thing is like the free company houses.
Yeah.
You can buy clubhouses. And all the other stuff you can do with your money. And it's very much kind of that, it's almost that kind of other life. What was it called?
Second Life.
Yeah. That kind of thing. It does appeal to that kind of crowd. And I think, especially in the last couple of years, I think this game really deserves the boost.
It's come into its own.
It really deserves the boost in popularity that it's got.
I just love that, the high-end content, haven't had fantastic experiences with trying it in the past. Now we've got an established free company with people that we all know. We are starting to now dip our toe into some of the early high-end content. We're kind of going in order of the game.
Which is why I really need to get back onto it and keep moving forward so I can play it.
But the thing is, we've got some high-end content that's out now that's come with Endwalker. And like every patch cycle before this, the reward for doing that content is like the top of the range gear.
Yes.
And you think, okay, great, that's fine. But once I have that top of the range gear, what do I then do with it until the next patch comes out?
Well, quite.
And then it becomes obsolete.
Yeah, that's true.
So there really is, it's purely there for the challenge.
Yeah.
There's really no benefit to doing it long term.
It's bragging rights, to be honest. But like I said, it is just there for you to kind of get something out of the experience.
It's there for,
as a reward,
it's basically the end game challenge. It's the hardest content in the game. And if you can, the satisfaction of being able to do it. But if you don't want to do it,
You're not penalised.
You're not penalised for not doing it, which I love.
There's a prestige to it, I'm sure, amongst certain circles. Like if you walked into a hub wearing that armour, people would recognise.
People would know that that's where it came from.
I wouldn't have a fucking clue. I would think, oh, that looks cool, but I wouldn't know what it is. Do you know what I mean? But it's
people that have played World of Warcraft, that's not how it was. You know, you had to get anywhere, you had to do that super difficult content at the end.
I think this is an important distinction. This is a topic of its own, really, is that there's two prongs to this. Firstly, this game has enjoyed a real boost in popularity because of the toxicity surrounding Activision Blizzard. And that's been an unintentional jab in the arm. There's been a sort of an unexpected jab in the arm, should I say, for the game.
Yeah.
This game has kind of adopted all of those players you've migrated over with open arms.
Yes.
I've heard that there has been some sort of toxicity from WoW players.
That's the irony.
That's the world that WoW is.
They're coming into our game and they're being toxic. But again, it's very few and far between.
It is. And they're also shut down quite quickly. And,
yes.
And it's become very apparent to those people that you can't survive in this game if you're going to behave.
I like to think it will be a learning experience, that you don't need to do that.
100%.
You don't need to behave in that way. You don't need to treat other people in that way. We're all just here having a good time. So get into it.
And that's the thing. That's the other thing you're saying about the difference with WoW. This Final Fantasy, I think, respects your time.
Yes.
It doesn't put unnecessary, ridiculous demands on your time. Because, like you say, if you miss something in WoW that means you don't get the new armor or whatever, you're at a disadvantage.
Yes.
As in it actively hinders you from playing the game. Final Fantasy, in my case, you can drop out of it for a couple of weeks, jump back in, and it's like
you don't suffer for that.
You don't suffer for that. It respects your time. However much you're prepared to put into it, and when you can put into it, is absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's it.
The only disadvantage you might be perceived of having is obviously if you're starting at the bottom and moving up.
It's only really...
But even then, the journey of that is so much fun that it's not...
It's only really if you're playing at the same time as other people. If you kind of take a pause, then you might fall behind and you won't be at the same point.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
That's really the only drawback, and it's not a big deal.
And even if you are, like where I've just finished Heaven's Ward and I'm moving up, when you're doing the quests for that, it's not like older games where you will struggle to matchmake, because this game has a system called MSQ. Is that right? Is that what it's called?
What are you talking about?
Where you're leveling up. So people can do older quests to level up. So there's always people in theory playing those.
Oh, you're talking about the roulettes, the
yes,
finder roulettes.
That's it, yeah. So in theory, there's never a situation where you would struggle to find a matchmaking for a certain old dungeon, because
very specific things,
very old ones maybe that
very
people
old
avoid.
Specific content and it's generally because it's so difficult that people don't use the duty finder. They don't want to be matched with random players because it's just chaos. It's just a disaster. But you then have the party finder where you can actually build a proper party with other players and kind of discuss it before you go into it.
But my point is that even if you are starting at the ground up, you're not locked out of anything.
No.
Because in theory, there is still a trove of thousands of other players still playing this content. Because even if they're just doing it to level up,
they're just doing the dailies.
There's still people doing it.
That's it.
So it never. That's what I mean. It's a
never
game
feels
that
stagnant.
really, really respects your time. It doesn't put you in a position where you feel you have to commit to it. There's no. There's never been a point where I've kind of worried about having a break with it.
There's no FOMO.
No. That's the thing, and that's why I like it, because I like to play my single player games a lot. So I'll play a good big chunk of this and get through it like I did. I went through Heaven's Ward pretty much in one big sitting over a couple of weeks. And then I've taken a break because I was playing Mass Effect again. I'm playing Cyberpunk at the moment. I'll go back to it then and do Stormblood and then keep playing it. And then what I would like to do is just go back to playing it regularly on each week. But yeah, it's a game that really, really respects your time, and that's what I like about it the most.
When you compare that to the likes of Destiny 2, which is complete FOMO. If you're not playing it several times a week, you will miss stuff.
Well, you will, because then the thing with Destiny was weapons, because there were timed events.
The limited time events where you could only get a certain weapon within a certain. It was this whole season and battle pass thing, wasn't it? Where you could only get certain things in certain times, and then they turn around and start deleting old content that you paid for. Whereas you look at Final Fantasy XIV, it's like everything that was in there from the bar version 1.0.
Of course, yeah.
Everything that was there from day one is there. Yeah, they have trimmed a bit of fat out of A Realm Reborn, but that was because everyone said it was boring.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's a quality of life improvement
and
that the community asked for.
You don't lose anything because it was just padding and nonsense that was taken out.
It's basically just streamlining. And I really enjoy kind of the culture that surrounds the game. Like the memes. I have had so much fun
Some of the
twisting
meme
around on
content is
Reddit.
absolutely hilarious.
And that's the thing, I find that it is a really inclusive bunch of people that play this game, because some of the memes, because you were saying about being part of an LGBTQ group, I've noticed it's not an explicitly stated thing, but you can tell that this community player base is really, really rich and diverse by looking at the memes.
Yes.
Because the memes have just come from everywhere.
Yeah.
And you can apply them to all sorts of different scenarios within the game. And they're fucking funny. They're really, really funny. Like there's a favourite in our free company, isn't there? Which is the Let's Go one.
Let's Go.
Let's
Sweetie.
Go. And that's fucking funny. The one with the gays is just brilliant. It's absolutely, because it's just Sprouts and the gays walking straight into the eye of the gays. I still do it now. So it's just a really wholesome, I really love it. It's just a game that every time I play it, I just feel really kind of...
I'm with my people.
It's just nice.
Yeah.
It's just a really nice community. And I think it's I would say probably the best online community I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, me too. 100%.
There's just, for any niggling negative, there is a trove of positive, which is such a rare thing.
Yeah.
I mean, playing games like we did in the Xbox 360 era, that was the Wild West of games.
Yeah.
You remember being in a waiting room for a new map on COD or something.
If you had voice chat on,
that's what I mean.
good
and
grief.
You would listen to the voice chat that was going on, and it was just flame wars going back
I
and forth.
wore that mute all button out.
From going from that to this, it's just night and day. And it's just, like I said, I've never been part of a community that's just been so overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
It's a weird place to be in, because that's unusual.
Yeah.
It's an exception.
It's the exception, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, I like about Final Fantasy the most. It's just a really positive experience. Every time I play it, it's just a complete palate cleanser. If I'm having, everything about it is just fun. You can jump in and out of it as you need to. It's got a really nice social element to it. And it deserves every success it's had, as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that it is now taking up the majority of the, it's probably is it now fair to say that it's the biggest MMO
It is.
online?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which after Activision's poor behaviour.
And we are starting to see competitors come out. Like you had, is it New World that came out a while ago?
I don't pay a huge amount of attention to this.
And then Lost Ark has just come out. You also have Black Desert, but none of them have really made a dent in, comparatively speaking.
I mean, that's the thing, because it does carry the Final Fantasy name, but I suppose that's the beauty of Final Fantasy, is I think the Final Fantasy as a whole franchise is a bit of a collection of different stories anyway, isn't it? So I don't play this game as a Final Fantasy game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just play it as a really good online MMO.
Yeah.
As an introduction to an MMO, it's been a gift. It really has been a gift.
I completely agree with that you don't have to be a Final Fantasy fan to enjoy it.
No.
But if you are a Final Fantasy fan,
there's a lot to find and love
incredible fan service, unbelievable.
There is. I've noticed that, some of the more sort of iconic things of the previous games, I've seen little nods to it.
Yeah.
So even I kind of know what it is.
And for someone, if someone's played this franchise from the beginning, there's something for fans of every single Final Fantasy game that's ever been released, basically.
Yeah.
It's wild. Like you can go into a duty and be like, half the party be like, oh my God, this boss from such and such Final Fantasy game, how amazing is that? And everyone else is like, who?
Well, that was the thing. That was the big one that I noticed when I first started playing this game, because is it Ifrit is one of the
the primal
bosses in the primal. So even I was a bit like, okay, I recognize
him from 10.
Captain America, when Captain America, I understood that. I got that reference. It's literally that. So there's a lot of fan service to it, but as I say, it functions purely as a standalone game. Again, I think we've sort of lost focus on this one.
Oh, we have completely. I did want to touch upon the expansions themselves.
Oh, of course.
As we said before, A Realm Reborn is a very typical tropey RPG storyline that's perfectly fine and serviceable. The voice acting is terrible. A lot of the writing is terrible as well. Some of the characters are really unlikable. We move on.
Yes.
I know people really rave about Heavensward. I think Stormblood is underrated and Heavensward is overrated. And I think Heavensward is overrated because it comes off the back of
A Realm Reborn. It follows A Realm Reborn.
It's so much better than what came before it.
Yeah.
Whereas Stormblood is probably about the same quality as Heavensward. So it felt more underwhelming.
I think that's fair. I can completely understand what you mean by that. There's that immediate and very, very, very stark jump in quality.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that's what makes it stand out in people's minds. It's probably the point where they kind of went from thinking, no, this is okay, to okay, Now I'm invested, and now I'm going to stay on this game. This is what sort of got me on board.
Whereas Stormblood, it's like, oh, it's just as good as Heavensward. That's really boring. I think people were expecting another huge leap.
Yeah, just keep our expectations in perspective. The quality already went sky high.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It went into the stratosphere in terms of an improvement of quality.
It's actually interesting, though, when I think about it.
You can only maintain that quality. It'd be very difficult to go higher than that, I think.
But this is the thing, and this is what's just occurred to me, is that the jump from A Realm Reborn to Heavensward was so huge, and then Stormblood kind of carried that quality on, and then Shadowbringers, it then comes up again.
Oh, I was like, because you've almost been spoiled by that point.
That's the thing.
Complain about something being better.
You don't think it could really get any better, and then Shadowbringers, it just, as you say, it comes up again, and then Endwalker then continues that on. I think Endwalker may even kind of not maybe as much, but
there is a little
come up even further still.
Yeah.
So it's the content is constantly improving and evolving in the most insane ways. When you look at those first dungeons in A Realm Reborn, like you've got Sestasha, you've got Tamtara Deepcroft, and at the time, I was like, "This is incredible."
Well, I was when we were playing it, and you were all just amazing. Like, "What? You can excited?"
And now, when
it's fun.
when you look at pictures from these dungeons side by side, you look at pictures of Sestasha side by side, and then you look at picture of, say, I don't know, a dungeon of some description from like your Shadowbringers or your Endwalker.
Yeah.
The difference in scale and scope and detail and effects and everything about this content.
Well, we keep using the word quality, but it's the only word I can use.
The quality is just escalating constantly throughout. So if you start at A Realm Reborn and you think, I'm having a great time with this, keep going, because it's just going to get so much better. It's only going to get better. It's only going to get better and better and better. And this is not, a lot of people, like when you look at a game series and you have sequels, like the whole debate about whether the later Mass Effect games are better than the first one or not, and it's all subjective. You have people that like the first one, you have people that prefer the second, you have 100%. People that their favorite is the third for whatever reason. I find it hard to understand how anyone could look at this and be subjective about, well, you might prefer the content in Shadowbringers, but I prefer
There's a very objective, definitive
improvement
every time. Yeah,
that agreed. I don't think anyone can disagree.
No, I don't. I agree with you, and I would probably say the people who say Heavensward is their it's almost it's an emotive thing rather than
it's more about the characters that were part of that storyline.
It's an objective kind of. It's just all tied up into that sudden big jump in quality, and it's probably more just it's reflective of a time period of wow. When this came out, this was really special.
Was huge. Yeah,
this was a really big deal.
The game had already been rescued, which was a huge deal for fans. And then I think Heavensward was the first bit where it was like, okay, this is actually going to be something really special. Okay,
so they said they were going to improve this.
They did. Yeah.
This is something to get excited about now. This is something that's really special.
And I think Stormblood was just underwhelming because you're
just a spoiled brat by that point.
That's it. And it wasn't a huge leap.
Yeah.
In terms of the quality, I think I must say that some of the dungeon content and bosses of Stormblood are still some of the absolute best content in the game.
I think it's just that sort of thing when what does when a millionaire gets bored of sleeping on silk sheets?
That's exactly. That's the thing. By the time, what I would say about Heavensward is, I don't think the dungeon content is quite as good as people say it is.
Okay.
I think a lot of the dungeon content in Heavensward is very similar in quality to.
Is that kind of maybe symptomatic of sort of just a level of hyperbole around the release?
Potentially,
people are just very excited to have new things to play.
That's it. I think from Stormblood onwards, that's when the dungeon content starts getting like really stunningly good. And some of the raid content, all of the raid content actually of Stormblood in the post-patch content of Stormblood is just, I mean, talk about fan service. The end game raid content of Stormblood is probably the biggest chunk of fan service of any game that I've ever played in my entire life. I died with every stage that unlocked. I died a little bit more because I was like,
where can this possibly go?
Yeah. How can this get more exciting? Again, I don't want to say what it is, because if you are a fan of the franchise, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's just you. And again, this is all optional content. You can miss it completely.
And this, again, it just keeps drawing back to this is a game that has been made by a group of developers who have nothing but respect for the time and for the commitment of its player base. It doesn't take its player base for granted.
No.
It continues a level of quality that just seems to improve with everyone. And it just offers you, if you want it, it's there, but you're not going to be penalised for not doing it. You get as much out of this game as you want to, and everybody will enjoy what they get out of it.
Yeah.
And if you want more, it's there.
It's there.
It appeals to the diehards, the casuals, the people who are in between, the newcomers, and people who've come over from other types of games.
Yeah.
It's just a game, I think, to conclude, in my case, something that's just welcomed new players with open arms.
Yeah. Even now, at a stage where we have had this mass exodus from World of Warcraft, and we're now up to 25 million players.
Which is just insane. I can't even begin to imagine what 25 million people look like.
I'll tell you what it looked like. It looked like those fucking queues when Endwalker dropped out. Those queues of 5,000 people trying to get in. Thank God I work from home, because I was literally
logging in at lunchtime.
Logging in at 2 p.m, ready for 5. Absolutely
even
ridiculous.
Then you still have time to probably go and make a bit of dinner before you go through dinner. But yeah, I think unless there is anything else from you, I think we've pretty much.
I was really
lyrical.
keen not to kind of go into the story, mainly because it's so detailed and so, I don't want to say convoluted, because that makes it sound bad. It's not. It's a great storyline, but I can't.
It'd also be quite difficult for you and I to discuss, given I haven't got there.
This is the other thing. You're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I also don't want to spoil it although we enjoy being quite spoilertastic when we
still
discuss
quite
the
new,
franchise.
isn't it? This is
it's
quite
still
fresh.
new.
Yeah, there are people who. I mean, that's the thing with it. Everyone I know who does play this game is at a different point in it.
Yeah.
Because there's
so you have
people
to watch your mouth.
There's people
constantly.
in our free company who are like only one piece of content ahead from me.
Yeah.
Some people who are behind me. Some people who have finished everything. So everybody I know who plays this is in a different place.
Yeah.
Which is quite an interesting way for it to, it's quite an interesting period of the game to be in. But yeah, it is, as I say, if that would be my takeaway from it as someone who's fairly new to it and someone who has never played a game like this before. It is absolutely worth your time.
Yeah.
I would suggest, even if it's not necessarily in your nature to do so, try and engage with the community, because the community are lovely and they will help you. There's so much to love with this game. Every time I play it, I just find it a really welcoming, warming, wholesome experience. If I just want to sit at home, just chill.
Yes,
I just log
can be
into
very
it because
chill.
it's just really nice.
Yeah.
You can chat to people in it. You can fart around doing whatever you like.
If you want to go and kill something, you can go and kill something.
It's a nice, warming, positive community to just hang around in, and it's really, really unique online experience that I've never had before, but it's one that stuck with me.
Yeah, and don't let the Final Fantasy name put you off.
No, that's an important takeaway.
I mean, for me, it was the Final Fantasy name that pulled me in.
It was
being a fan of the franchise, but don't let it put. If you think that it's not for you, but you're intrigued by the premise of an MMO, give it a go.
I'm living proof.
Yeah, exactly.
Living proof.
Exactly.
It is. It's. I think there's something. If you know people who play it, even better. Or just try and find a group of people. There are communities across everywhere designed for new players to come and get advice and to meet up with people to help them do bits of content. I've seen it. Be it on Reddit, be it on Twitter, be it everywhere. There's
an absolute treasure trove of resources online to help. If you want to, if you're the kind of person that wants to play absolutely 100% optimally, there are so many decent resources online to help you do that.
Yeah.
With rotations, and there's various tools for crafting, macros generation and all the rest of it. And it's just...
The world is your oyster with
this
game, basically. There is something in it for everybody. And I think if it's a kind of game that you're even curious about, I can't recommend it enough. If for nothing else, the value for money that you get from this game is obscene. I think if someone told me I couldn't play anything else for the next 12 months,
you'd be all right.
I'd be okay about it.
Yeah.
I'd miss certain things.
It would be my desert island
but
game.
I would never be bored. Yeah, that's the thing. If it would be it'd be a perfect desert island game, because you could never, in theory, be bored of it. There'd always be something for you to do. You'd have people to speak to.
And let's not forget, we're saying it's great value for money, but the free trial is huge.
The free trial.
You don't even have to buy it. You can go up to level 60 out of 90.
About 120 hours
easily.
In a box. Easily.
The level cap at the moment is 90. You can go up to level 60 as a free player, and you get access to A Realm Reborn and Heavensward which
For
is
nothing.
hundreds of hours of stuff
For nothing.
for nothing,
Yeah.
which is insane.
It is
but
insane.
It's great.
Yeah.
So if you are at all on the fence, just give it a go. What have you got to lose?
Exactly that. And that would be my takeaway from it. That would be, yeah. I gave it a chance. It's not something that would ever have previously been on my radar or my kind of game. And it's brilliant. It's easily one of the very best things I've played in a very long time.
And as this episode was supposed to be about the Endwalker expansion, Endwalker is very good.
Endwalker's, I'm
The
sure,
end.
it'll be brilliant. And I look forward to picking it up at a very reasonable price when I get there. So yeah, that concludes our Final Fantasy XIV episode. Our
Yes, it was another meaty one.
Our next episode will sort of be a 2021 wrap up then.
So we're going to talk about all the games that we couldn't really fill an episode. We say that, but it's...
Well, you say that, and there's one particularly I'm looking forward to talking about, which is Resident Evil Village. We're going to be talking about the Grand Theft Auto trilogy.
Oh yes,
as a
that'll be
dishonorable
fun.
mention. What else is there? Returnal was another game.
Yeah, Returnal was an option. Persona 5 Strikers was an option. The Hades, there's a few.
Was another one. There's a couple of different things we can touch on. So yeah, that'll be the wrap up for 2021, and then we'll pick our next big topic, which I have a feeling is going to be Cyberpunk.
Yeah,
when we both finish the PS5 version.
Yeah, we may do an episode in between where we kind of talk about the games that we're most excited for this year.
Yes, that's
which
probably
could be a good one.
Yeah.
Just so that it gives us this month and next month. It's just insane for games. I have a list as long as your arm.
Yeah, this is it. And yet he still plays Final Fantasy XIV.
But I don't. Somehow. I haven't played it for weeks.
Oh right, okay.
Because I've been playing the Mass Effect trilogy.
Yeah. So yeah, that will be us then for this episode, and we'll be back then with the 2021 wrap up.
Yes, we will see you then. Thank you for listening if you did.
Yes.
And,
it's also important to mention we're now on socials.
Oh, we're everywhere now.
We have places you can find
places and things. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram. We are Jen and Fenn Pod on all three of those platforms. We're also on YouTube, the Jen and Fenn Podcast.
Yeah.
Which is just basically somewhere else we can put the episodes. We don't care.
We have also had a little bit of feedback on it, which is lovely already.
We had our
very nice.
first comment from our fan, and I think we both jumped to the conclusion that it was someone the other person knew.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was just a lovely comment that was very complimentary of our Hitman episodes. That was nice. We would love to hear from you if you want to tweet us or comment on the YouTube.
Yeah. If there are rating systems available on Spotify, and
please like and subscribe and do whatever it is you have to do to make us world famous.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much again for your time.
Yes, indeed. And we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.